Good afternoon. Welcome to the next edition of panel discussion organized by Dravidian Professionals Forum. I am Dharnidharan, Executive Coordinator of DPF, and I would be moderating today's session titled From Mixed to Crony Capitalism Redefining India's Political Economy. Many players in the world are seeing rise in populism. At the same time, we are also seeing a rise in inequality, increase in Gini index. Most often, both these trends are intertwined. One of our speakers today, Rachel Tamal Quran, in her book has stated 7 steps in which a country could be lost, which includes create a motion, design your own citizens, and dismantle the institutions. Previously to this, long ago, Gustave Le Bon, a French psychologist and physicist, wrote a book on crowd psychology, a book that served as a Bible for the fascists in the 30s and 40s. Gustave Le Bon says the rational ability of the crowd is much lower than an individual, and the leader who managed to excite the crowd can hypnotize the crowd and control the electorate. We have seen this happen throughout the history. We have seen this happen in Turkey. Probably we are seeing this in India. And unsurprisingly, India, we're also seeing policies that are made against the interests of the majority. For example, reduction of corporate taxes from 35% to 22%. India somewhere lost between 3 lakh crores to 6 lakh crores in revenue. Similarly, Indians by far spend the highest when it comes to fuel prices. 17% of the average revenue is spent by average Indian on fuel, by far the highest in the world. In comparison, Americans spend about half a percent of the income on fuel. According to old data labs started by Paris School of Economics and UC Berkeley, finds that income of middle income Indian populace has reduced over the past decade. Niranjan Sarkar, in a recent article which he published and became very famous, observed that income of the top 20 companies grew by 50% in the last 7 years. Or let me not talk about electoral bonds, where anonymous amount of funding could be given to any political party, but which the ruling party has managed to get in bulk and in majority. So this leads us to ask the question which Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel laureate, asks in his book, The Price of Inequality. Why do majority always get carried away by those who act against their interests? With this, let me introduce you the panel and let them take over. In the panel is Dr. An Honorable Minister P.T.R.Palanivel Rajan. He serves as the Minister for Finance, Human Resources, Government of Tamil Nadu. He is founding secretary of DMK's IT Wing, and before entering politics, he was Senior Managing Director of Standard Chartered Bank. Next speaker is Rachel Tamal Quran. She is a political commentator and a journalist. She is Turkey's most read political columnist. Her book, How to Lose a Country, was an international bestseller, and her book was discussed at the upper house of Indian Parliament. Finance Minister of Ireland to Irish Times referred her in a column as an apparent heir to Max Weber's legacy. Next is Manoja, who is a senior member of Parliament representing the upper house and the RJD party. He is a national spokesperson for RJD party, and he was a professor at the University of Delhi. He has played a significant role in opposition unity, and he was a joint opposition candidate for Rajya Sabha deputy chairman post. And he has also spoken on Rachel Tamal Quran's book, How to Lose a Country in 7 Steps in the Parliament. With this, I request the Honorable Finance Minister to speak.
Thank you, Dharni, for that kind introduction. Apologize if I was a couple of minutes late. As with all these events, I'm just going to be kind of the, what can I say, the cedar of the conversation. I'm going to say some very basic things that a simple politician like me can see. And then I look forward very much to hearing from our distinguished panelists, who I'm very happy to share the platform with. So, we are in a very unique position in India today. Dharni, you spoke about some of the outcomes in terms of the increasing disparity of very few companies doing very well and the rest of the economy all the way down to the layman paying the price for it. Some of this, I think, is structural. It's not unique to India. It's not unique to this regime. If I think about it in my kind of from the basics perspective, the nature of capitalism is to produce such winners and many losers. And this is a concept that has been explored all the way from, the Karl Marx manifesto onwards about the capital versus labor argument to, in more recent times, Thomas Piketty's Capital of the 20th Century and the statistics that show the return to capital continuously increasing and labor continuously decreasing. But there's something more profound about capitalism, which I think one of our Tamil Nadu government advisors, former Reserve Bank Governor Thiaga Rajan, wrote about, almost 20 years ago now, in a book called Saving Capitalism from the Capitalists. He said, in democracies, which are supposed to be the natural kind of political organization that supports capitalist models of economies, you very often find that you have huge winners, mega winners, who then become so big that they're able to game the system. Once they storm the citadel and build themselves a fancy fort, then they draw up all the bridges across the moats. And through lobbying and through political influence, they make sure that it's no longer a level playing field. And in that sense, the job of governments is to ensure that there is a level playing field, because in the long run, that is the right outcome, even in the capitalist model for society. And the actual capitalist model is corrupted by the winners and the early and mega winners in an economy. If we park that for a second and look at our country, the natural instinct of democratic governments, which is supposed to be to provide level playing fields, and the path that is otherwise being subverted by these capitalists, is done in spades once you start going away from democracy towards authoritarianism. And I think it's fair to say that if we were to use simply the words of the current Prime Minister when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat for the last 13 years, it's very clear that what has happened in the last 7 years and increasingly in the last couple of years is a massive power shift away from the states towards the center and away from the institutions towards a one or two man kind of nexus, which controls almost every institution of state and does it with scant regard for democratic norms or the constitutional constraints. But if you go from kind of a reasonably functional democracy with reasonably independent institutions towards a floundering one and towards a floundering democracy, but a much more on its knees economy, driven not just by the nature of authoritarianism that it can remove the kind of efficient outcomes, because no one or two people are that competent, and no corrupted institution or swung or lack of independent institution can deliver the goods. So the natural outcome of authoritarianism is a losing proposition in economic and democratic experiences. So if that is the case, in the last 7 years, we can expand on that and we can say this government did more than that. For the sake of drama, for the sake of megalomania even, we have seen events that have been so ill thought out, ill conceived, and so damaging to the economy that it's like digging your own grave. So beyond the normal capitalism issues and authoritarian problems, we have now arrived at a place where we have this unique kind of descent, where we had successively many years of a lack of growth. And people get angry, and there are two ways of governing. One that is very rarely used, which is to say, look, what have I done in the last 5 years or 10 years? Have I delivered for you? Are you happy? The Ronald Reagan kind of mantra, are you better off today? That's very rarely used in politics. Most often it is, imagine the consequences, rabble-rousing, demagoguery, fear-mongering, division. If not us, the world will collapse, the country will collapse, you'll be invaded. Othering, hatred, this kind of stuff. And when you're doing that, then you kind of end up in a vicious cycle. And we are, I think, at about the kind of breaking point of that vicious cycle, if I look at it optimistically, which is that we have now seen a system that's perfected. It is perfected because the more the economy goes in tatters, the more the public enterprises like the Air Indias and the the gas and the oil and all of these things have been stripped of assets or run into debt. Once they are distressed and you have a big hole in the balance sheet, you say you have to sell those for the sake of raising money. And then you announce this kind of, which no seller will ever tell you, I have the stock for the next 5 years of several lakh crores. You kind of damage your own market by increasing the supply when there is no demand, or for the same demand you increase the amount of supply. And then you find your convenient friends who can buy these assets at distressed sale prices. In many cases, assets that were built on the back of state governments, airports, many state governments, all state governments in many of these airports gave land for free. And then the union government turns around and sells it to their buddies at a distressed sale price. And as you pointed out, the reverse mechanism, which is hard in most democracies, it's not impossible, but it's hard to do, is to do blatant repayment back to the political party. And that problem has been taken out through the introduction of electoral bonds. So once they have electoral bonds, they don't even have to cloak or worry about how they get paid back for handing out the gifts to their cronies. And so you end up with a situation where you have reached this extreme end of the vicious cycle where there's only about 4 or 5 people that matter, 2 or 3 crony capitalists and 2 or 3 politicians. The economy be damned, the quality of life be damned, democracy be damned. And all it is that they keep reinforcing each other. The problem with this is we can start to see the model fray, not just in the fact that the quality of life at the lower end of the spectrum or the rate of taxation, or as you pointed out, the percentage of income that's spent on energy or other things. But you're starting to see except the ultra rich, except the uber rich, even the mega rich are starting to flee the country. So if you look at the departure of kind of 10 millionaires, 100 millionaires, etc., that thing has accelerated tremendously in the last 5-6 years. I think there's a lot of data, and particularly in the last 2-3 years. So you have started to create this vacuum. You have these 2 or 3 people that control the economy, and then you have the bulk of society that is suffering real lack of growth. And because our population is still growing, we are going to have a very small pie to be divided by more and more people. So on an adjusted for inflation, adjusted per capita basis, we are seeing almost stagnation. This is the part of the economic cycle. Let's remember that we should have been seeing the 10-12% a year real growth that China did. And just to put that in context, in 1990, the per capita income between China and India was roughly the same. India was slightly higher than China. Right now, China is between 3 and 5 times, depending on which statistic you look at. So in about 31 years, that gap has just skewed immeasurably. And I think the real sad consequence of this is, none of these models are sustainable forever. Sooner or later, these models will break. The consequence is probably the loss of half or a generation, a full generation, in terms of the decade or so of lost growth, of lost progress, of lost jobs, of lost outcomes. But I think we have 3 or 4 mega trends converging where we have arrived at probably, at least in the modern era, after the kind of robber barons of the United States and so forth, we are probably seeing this kind of ultimate outcome of crony capitalism, at least in a country this large. I don't think it's been seen before. Now, one could argue that it's hard to separate the industrialists and the Communist Party in China, which is probably true. But at least the average citizen's outcome has improved quite a bit. Here, our average citizen's outcome has actually been retarded for the last 7 years. And so the consequences of this crony capitalism, I think, are quite severe. And this is quite an extreme example. With that, I should probably just stop and let other panelists give more enlightened views. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir.